The dining room smelled of roasted sage and suppressed resentment. I sat at the periphery, watching my family perform their annual pantomime of gratitude while I calculated the integrity of my wine glass. My mother had slipped me a thin envelope just minutes before, whispering about tight finances. I thanked my grandfather for the $500 check. He stopped carving the turkey, looked me straight in the eye, and said, "The gift I wired you was $500,000. The serrated knife hovered motionless above the steaming meat. Silence didn't just fall. It detonated, sucking the oxygen right out of the room. My mother dropped her serving spoon, the stainless steel clattering against the china like a gunshot in a library. Across the table, my sister Olivia froze with her wine glass halfway to her mouth, her knuckles turning the color of bone. I didn't gasp. I didn't exclaim. I simply watched the blood drain from their faces, with the detached curiosity of a scientist, observing a lab specimen reacting to a toxin. Most people would have stammered a correction or assumed the old man was confused. I am not most people. I deal in data and binary truths, and right now, the data was screaming. Grandpa wasn't senile. His eyes were clear, sharp, and currently locked onto mine with an intensity that burned. He knew exactly what he had sent. The discrepancy wasn't an error. It was a crime scene. I felt a cold, familiar calm settle over me, sharpening my vision until every detail stood out in relief. "Dad, you are confused," my mother said, her laugh a brittle, terrible sound that fooled absolutely no one. She reached out to touch his arm, but he pulled away as if she were contagious. "The doctor said your medication might cause memory lapses. Let's not ruin dinner with stories." Her eyes darted to me, pleading for collusion, begging me to play the part of the dutiful daughter one. Last time, it was a desperate gamble. She had no idea I was already counting the cards. I fingered the envelope in my blazer pocket. The paper felt heavy, burdened by the lie written in my mother's looping script. $500. That was the price they had put on my complicity. It was insulting, really. Not the amount, but the assumption that I wouldn't notice a fortune missing from my own life. Chase, Olivia's fiancé, finally set his glass down. "Maybe we should check the accounts later," he suggested, his voice smooth, practiced, and entirely too casual for a man witnessing a family implosion. I looked at Grandpa. He wasn't looking at them. He was waiting for me. He was offering me a choice between the peace of the lie and the violence of the truth. I smiled, a small, tight expression that didn't reach my eyes. "Yes," I said softly, picking up my fork. "We should definitely check the accounts." The silence that returned to the dining room wasn't peaceful. It was the static, charged vacuum that precedes an explosion. I took a bite of turkey. It tasted like victory. 3 days before the turkey incident, I was safe in Denver. My world was a soothing cascade of hexadecimal code and cold coffee. The silence of my home office, lit only by the blue glow of 3 monitors, was my shield. I was tracking a fishing ring out of Estonia, watching their servers light up like a digital Christmas tree. Then my phone buzzed against the mahogany desk. It was my sister, Olivia. That was the first warning sign. I let it buzz twice before answering. Olivia never called unless she needed an audience or a loan. "Hey, Parker," she chirped, her voice pitched an octave higher than normal. It was her concerned sister voice. a performance she usually reserved for when she wanted to borrow a dress she would never return. I was just thinking about you. Are you super busy with work? The background noise on her end sounded echoey, like she was pacing in a bathroom. Always, I said, keeping my eyes on the monitor. What's up, Liv? She hesitated, a pause that felt rehearsed. Well, Mom and I were talking. Maybe you should skip Thanksgiving this year. My fingers stopped typing. The cursor blinked a steady, rhythmic pulse like a heartbeat on the screen. Why? I asked. Grandpa is really tired lately, she said quickly. The doctor wants him to have zero excitement. We think a quiet holiday is best. It didn't track. Grandpa thrived on debate, history, and the kind of intensity Olivia claimed he needed to avoid. He seemed fine when we spoke last week, I countered. He was asking about my promotion. Olivia sighed, a sound of exaggerated patience. He puts on a brave face for you, Parker. But honestly, it's the airfare, too. We know money is tight for you right now. That stopped me cold. I had never discussed my finances with her. I'll think about it, I said, and hung up before she could pivot. I stared at my reflection in the dark monitor. Olivia worrying about my bank account was like a shark worrying about a swimmer's hydration. Something was wrong. I opened my banking app. Navigating to the joint account Grandpa had set up for me a decade ago. It was our emergency cushion. I authenticated with my thumbprint. The little spinning wheel mocking my rising pulse. The balance screen loaded. The number was $2,142. My stomach dropped. The cushion was gone. I clicked on the transaction history, my heart hammering against my ribs. The 14th of August. Incoming wire, $500,000. The 15th of August, outgoing wire, $499,800. Destination external account. The math was brutal and precise. $500,000 had touched down in my name and vanished within 24 hours. Someone had used my account as a layover for a massive theft. I stared at the remaining balance. Why leave anything at all? Then I checked the bank's alert settings. Low balance notification. Triggered under $2,000. Whoever did this knew the system intimately. They calculated the exact amount needed to keep the account active and silent. They didn't just steal the money. They engineered the theft to keep me blind until it was too late. I wasn't dealing with a glitch. I was hunting a professional. I didn't panic. Panic is for people who don't know how to query a database or trace a digital breadcrumb. I opened a second terminal window and logged into the bank's document repository, using the shared credentials Grandpa and I established 3 years ago. The interface was clunky, a relic of legacy banking software, but the correspondence folder had a new entry, a PDF file named POAexecog10.pdf, sat at the top of the list. I downloaded it. My mouse hand steady, despite the cold dread in my stomach. The document opened with a pixelated lag, revealing a standard power of attorney form, granting unlimited access to my joint account. The beneficiary named was Rebecca Graves, my mother. I scanned the clauses, the dense legal boilerplate, designed to strip a person of their agency. It was dated the 10th of August, 4 days before the wire transfer hit. The notary stamp belonged to a man I recognized, Arthur Peston, an old friend of my father who had lost his license for embezzlement in 2018. I zoomed in on the signature block at the bottom of the page. Parker Graves was scrawled across the line in blue ink. At first glance, it looked perfect. The loop of the P and the sharp cross of the were undeniable. But when I magnified the image to 400%, the illusion shattered. The ink density was too uniform. There were no natural pressure variations or ink bleeds. This wasn't a pen stroke. It was a digital composite. I pulled up a scanned lease agreement from my files for comparison. The signatures were identical, down to the microscopic jitter on the finals. No human signs their name exactly the same way twice. My mother hadn't just forged my signature. She had photocopied it from an old birthday card or document, cleaned it up in Photoshop, and pasted it onto a felony. It was sloppy work, amateurish even, but it had been enough to fool a bored bank teller. I closed the PDF and returned to the transaction log. The money had left the account as quickly as it arrived, flowing into an external routing number. I ran a search on the destination bank identifier. It belonged to a regional bank in Connecticut. The account holder wasn't my mother, though. The wire memo read, Capital Investment, but the account name was listed as Rothwell Capital Management. The name sounded impressive, professional even, until I remembered who Rothwell actually was. Chase Rothwell, Olivia's fiancé. The man who always wore Italian loafers without socks and talked loudly about disrupting markets. I ran a quick corporate entity search on the Connecticut Secretary of State website. Rothwell Capital Management was an LLC formed on the 1st of August, exactly 2 weeks before the theft. It had no assets, no history, and a registered agent address that matched a UPS store in a strip mall. It wasn't a hedge fund. It was a digital bucket for stolen cash. The picture was complete, and it was uglier than I imagined. My mother had forged the access, but Chase had built the getaway car. They were treating Grandpa's legacy like a startup seed round. I printed the documents. The printer's rhythmic, whirring the only sound in my apartment. As I reached for the warm paper, I noticed one final detail on the LLC filing. The secondary manager listed wasn't Olivia. It was my father. Everyone was in on it. I needed to see where the money went. Bank transfers are abstract, but spending is tangible. I opened a new browser tab and navigated to Olivia's Instagram. Her profile was a public shrine to consumption, no privacy settings to be found. I scrolled back to August. The timeline was a colorful map of the crime. The 16th of August, 2 days after the wire transfer. She posted a photo from a first-class cabin. Champagne flutes clinked against a backdrop of clouds. The caption read, New Beginnings. #blessed. The location tag was the Maldives. I cross-referenced the flight dates with the Rothwell Capital withdrawal history. The numbers aligned perfectly. A $50,000 debit for travel services hit the account on the 15th. Olivia's feed became a slideshow of evidence. An overwater bungalow that cost more per night than my rent. A private yacht charter. Every filtered sunset and coconut cocktail was paid for with the legacy Grandpa intended for my future. It wasn't just theft. It was a celebration of it. Then came the centerpiece. The 20th of August. A close-up of her hand, manicured and tanned, weighed down by a rock the size of a glazier's mistake. He asked, and I said yes. The diamond was an emerald cut, platinum band. I ran a reverse image search and found the jeweler in Manhattan. Using the Chase Rothwell entity data, I queried the jeweler's invoicing portal. It was a long shot, but security on luxury retail sites is often laughable. I got a hit immediately. The invoice was dated the 19th of August. The total came to $32,000. The billing address matched the UPS store. But the cardholder name was Chase. They had purchased the engagement ring with the stolen funds. It was a closed loop of narcissism. He used the loot to propose to the girl, whose family helped him steal it. I took a screenshot, the capture sound loud in the quiet room. My folder of evidence was growing heavy. I opened PowerPoint. It felt absurd to use corporate tools for a family knife fight, but organization was my weapon. I created a timeline. Slide 1, the forged power of attorney. Slide 2, the wire transfer to Rothwell Capital. Slide 3, the bite-side comparison of the withdrawal and the Maldives flight booking. I aligned the timestamps down to the minute. The narrative was undeniable. It wasn't a misunderstanding or a loan. It was a systematic liquidation of Grandpa's trust. I thought I had seen it all, but the ledger had one last surprise. After the ring and the trip, there was a smaller transfer of $12,000. The recipient was Card Services. I traced the reference number. It wasn't a business expense. It was a payoff for a personal credit card, ending in 4,490. That was my mother's card. She had used the leftover change from the heist to clear her own shopping debt. She had sold her father's trust for retail solvency. I saved the file as thanksgivingtoast.pptx and loaded it onto a thumb drive. I also synced it to my phone and a cloud backup. Redundancy is key when dealing with volatile systems. Outside my window, the Denver sun was setting, casting long, bloody shadows across the floor. I wasn't just going home for turkey anymore. I was going home to perform an autopsy. I packed my bag, making sure to leave room for the portable projector. The show was about to begin. The gravel driveway crunching under my rental car tires sounded like bones breaking. My childhood home sat pristine against the gray Connecticut sky, a colonial facade masking the rot inside. I checked my bag one last time, ensuring the laptop and portable projector were buried beneath a layer of clothes. I needed to look harmless. I adjusted my glasses and slumped my shoulders, practicing the posture of the defeated corporate drone they expected. I wasn't the hunter today. I was the prey walking willingly into the wolf's den. Mom opened the door before I could knock. She was wearing her cashmere armor, a soft beige sweater that probably cost more than my first car. Her hug was stiff, a quick press of perfume and tension. "You look tired, Parker," she said, pulling back to scan my face for cracks. "Work must be killing you." It was a probe, not a comfort. She was checking if her manipulation had worked, if I was too exhausted to notice the knife in my back. Olivia drifted into the hallway, a glass of Chardonnay already in hand at noon. The diamond on her finger caught the foyer light, throwing sharp, spectral rainbows across the wall. It was mesmerizing to see my stolen heritage solidified into carbon and platinum. "Hey, stranger," she cooed, offering a cheek to kiss. She looked thinner, sharper, vibrating with a manic energy. "I am so glad you came. We were worried you'd be difficult." The subtext was loud enough to shatter glass. Grandpa was stationed in his wingback chair by the fire. a blanket draped over his legs like a prop. He looked up, his eyes clearing instantly when he saw me. "Parker," he rasped, holding out a hand that trembled slightly. I took it, feeling the strength still lingering in his grip. He squeezed twice. "Our old signal. Pay attention." He was playing the invalid to keep them complacent, but the man inside was wide awake and waiting for his moment. Chase sauntered in from the kitchen, wiping grease from his lip. He slapped me on the back with forced camaraderie. "Good to see you, Park. Liv says you are still grinding away in IT." He chuckled, swirling his drink. "You need to let your money work for you, you know. Passive income. That's the secret." I stared at him, marveling at the audacity. He was lecturing me on investment strategy while wearing a watch bought with my savings. "I'll keep that in mind," I said. Mom cornered me near the china cabinet while Olivia refilled drinks. She lowered her voice to a conspiratorial whisper. "Listen. Grandpa wanted to give you something, but he's been confused about numbers lately." She pulled a white envelope from her pocket. "I wrote the check for him to make sure it was correct. Just thank him and don't make a fuss, okay? He's sensitive." She pressed the paper into my palm. It felt hot against my skin. The final piece of evidence. I didn't open the envelope yet. I just nodded, sliding it into my blazer pocket right next to the thumb drive. "I understand, Mom. I won't upset him." She exhaled, her shoulders dropping an inch. She thought she had won. She thought she had successfully managed the problem child. "Good." She smiled, patting my arm. "Dinner is in 10 minutes. Wash up." I walked to the bathroom, locked the door, and looked at the mirror. "It was showtime, Dad, please," my mother hissed, her voice trembling with a cocktail of fear and rage. She glared at Grandpa, her face a mask of panicked authority. "We talked about these episodes. You are confusing your old stories with reality again." She reached for his wine glass, intent on removing it, but he slapped her hand away. The sound echoed like a gavel strike. "I am not confused, Rebecca," he growled. The air in the room curdled. It was time. I stood up, clearing my throat, and placed my phone on the table. "Actually, Mom, Grandpa is right," I said, my voice cutting through her stammering. I pulled the HDMI cable from my bag and plugged it into the smart television, mounted above the sideboard. The screen flickered from a football game to my stark white title slide. Financial Anomalies, August 2024. Chase laughed nervously, a sound that died in his throat when he saw the subtitle. "What is this?" Olivia asked, her voice shrinking. "Parker, sit down," my father commanded, finally looking up from his plate. "This is inappropriate." I ignored him and clicked a button on my phone. The slide advanced. A high-resolution scan of the bank ledger filled the screen. On the 14th of August, Grandpa wired $500,000 to our joint account. I explained, using my laser pointer to circle the entry. On the 15th of August, nearly every cent was transferred out. Grandpa stared at the screen, his mouth slightly open. He wasn't looking at the numbers, he was looking at the betrayal. "I knew it," he whispered, his eyes watering. "I knew I sent it, but who moved it?" Chase asked, feigning confusion. "Parker, you are the only one on that account." I clicked to the next slide. The forged power of attorney document loomed over the turkey carcass. I zoomed in on the signature. "This is a digital composite," I said, My tone clinical. The pixelation patterns match a scan from my 2019 lease agreement. The notary, Arthur Peston, lost his license years ago. I looked at my mother. She had sunk into her chair, her face the color of old ash. The money went to Rothwell Capital Management. I continued, advancing the slide to the Secretary of State filing. Chase's name appeared in bold letters next to a UPS store address. That's a shell company, isn't it, Chase? The room turned to look at him. He wiped his mouth with a napkin, his movements jerky. This is ridiculous, he sputtered, standing up. I manage assets. It was a loan. A legitimate investment strategy. He looked at Olivia for support, but she was staring at the television screen, paralyzed. Let's discuss the return on investment, I said. The screen changed again. On the left, the wire transfer withdrawal. On the right, Olivia's Instagram post from the Maldives. Below that, the invoice for the platinum engagement ring. The timestamps aligned perfectly. You funded your engagement with the money Grandpa meant for my future. Olivia let out a small, strangled sob. She looked down at her hand, then tried to hide the ring under the table. The sparkling diamond suddenly looked heavy, like a shackle. Dad, you told me to sit down, I said, turning to him. But you are listed as the secondary manager on the Rothwell LLC DAO. I brought up the filing again, highlighting his signature. Did you think I wouldn't check the corporate structure? His jaw worked silently. He poured another glass of wine. His hand shaking so badly that red liquid splashed onto the white tablecloth. It looked like a wound spreading across the fabric. He didn't deny it. His silence was a confession signed in blood. Chase threw his napkin onto his plate. I am done with this, he announced, his voice tight. I don't have to sit here and be slandered by some bitter IT girl. I am leaving. He grabbed his jacket from the back of the chair. I wouldn't do that, I said calmly. Slide 6 covers the Interstate Wire Act. Crossing state lines with stolen funds is a federal crime. I've already compiled the packet for the FBI. Chase froze halfway to the door, his confidence evaporating. My mother finally found her voice. Parker, stop it, she screamed, tears streaming down her face. We didn't steal it, we borrowed it? Olivia needed a start. You have a good job. You are always fine. You don't need help like she does. It was the truth of my childhood distilled into a single, poisonous sentence. I was the utility, Olivia was the prize. It wasn't yours to decide, I said. And you didn't borrow it. You erased the evidence and forged my name. Grandpa slowly pushed his chair back. The scraping sound was deafening in the quiet room. He walked over to the television, studying the projected image of the forged signature. He traced the line of my name with a trembling finger, then turned to look at his daughter. You told me Parker was grateful, he said, his voice dangerously low. You told me she sent her love. He looked at me, his eyes clear and devastatingly sad. Parker, hand me your phone. I have a call to make. Mom lunged across the table, not to attack, but to beg. Her hands clamped onto my blazer, twisting the expensive fabric in desperation. You can't do this, Parker. Think about the family. Think about what people will say at the club. Her vanity was a survival instinct, overriding even her shame. I peeled her fingers off me one by one, like removing burrs from a sweater. The wedding is paid for with stolen money, Mom. There is no wedding. Chase flinched near the doorway, already calculating his exit velocity. Olivia stared at the ring on her finger, twisting it until the skin turned red and angry. "You are just jealous," she spat, her voice cracking. "You've always been jealous because I am happy, and you are just alone with your computers." It was a weak, childish strike, but it was all she had left. "I am not jealous, Liv," I said, disconnecting the HDMI cable. The screen went black, plunging the room back into dim candlelight. "I am solvent. And unlike you, I am not going to prison for a vacation." Grandpa held my phone like a weapon. His thumb hovered over the keypad, trembling with age but not hesitation. "Dad, put it down," my father said, finally finding his voice. "We can work this out internally. A payment plan. We'll sell the boat." It was pathetic. They were still negotiating terms for a surrender that had already happened. Grandpa didn't look at him. "You signed the papers, Robert," he said, his voice devoid of warmth. "You helped them rob me. You helped them rob your own daughter." The room was so quiet, I could hear the dispatcher's tinny voice on the other end. 911. "What is your emergency?" Grandpa took a breath, his chest hitching with a rattle of grief. "I need to report a grand larceny," he stated clearly. "My name is William Graves. The thieves are in my house." Mom let out a sound that wasn't human, a keen of pure despair. She sank to the floor, ruining her cashmere knees on the hardwood. She realized finally that her father wasn't protecting her anymore. Chase made his move then. He lunged for the front door, abandoning his fiancée and his dignity in one motion. "I am not staying for this," he muttered, fumbling with the deadbolt. "Sit down, Chase," I said, not moving from my spot. "The neighbors have cameras. My dashcam is running in the driveway. If you run, you just add evasion to the charge sheet." He froze, his hand on the brass knob. He looked back at Olivia, sobbing on the floor, and made a cold calculation. He slumped against the wall. The sirens didn't wail. They cut the air with sharp, chirping bursts as the cruisers pulled up. Blue and red lights washed over the dining room, strobing against the fine china and the half-eaten turkey. It was a grotesque collision of Norman Rockwell and true crime. My father poured another glass of wine, drinking it in one long, shuddering gulp. He was anesthetizing himself for the handcuffs. Mom stopped crying and started fixing her hair. Even in ruin, she couldn't bear to look unpresentable for the audience. The knocking was heavy and authoritative. Grandpa nodded to me, giving permission to open the door he had owned for 40 years. Two officers stepped into the foyer, bringing the smell of rain and cold air with them. "We got a call about a theft," the lead officer said, scanning the room. He saw the crying women, the drunk father, and the projector on the table. "It's all here," I said, handing him the dossier. Bank records, affidavits, and the forged documents. The officer weighed the heavy folder in his hands. "Rebecca Graves?" the officer asked. Mom stood up, smoothing her skirt with trembling hands. "It's a misunderstanding," she whispered, the lie habitual now. "We were just handling family business." The officer didn't smile. "Ma'am, turn around and place your hands behind your back." The click of the handcuffs was louder than the sirens. Olivia screamed when they touched her, a high, piercing shriek of entitlement meeting reality. "Chase, do something," she yelled. Chase looked at the floor, studying the pattern of the rug intently. Grandpa didn't look away. He watched his daughter and granddaughter being led out into the rain. His face carved from granite. It was the hardest thing he had ever done, harder than the war, harder than burying my grandmother. "I am sorry, Grandpa," I said, stepping to his side. "No," he said, his voice thick with unshed tears. "You saved me from living a lie, Parker. You gave me the truth. It's a bitter medicine, but I needed to swallow it." He leaned on his cane, heavy with grief. The cruisers pulled away, painting the living room walls with fading red light. My father sat alone at the table, staring at the wine stain, waiting for his own lawyer to call back. The feast was cold. The projector hummed in the silence. A machine doing its job in a house that had stopped functioning. I looked at the empty chairs where my family used to sit. We had burned it all down. The turkey sat centerpiece, perfect, uncarved and uneaten, a monument to a Thanksgiving that never happened. It had been 6 months since the sirens faded from the cul-de-sac. I parked outside the new condo complex. A modest brick building that smelled of fresh mulch. The sprawling colonial house was gone, sold to a family who didn't know its history. The sale proceeds had gone almost entirely to restitution. It was a fair trade. I walked up the path. Tuesday dinners were our new ritual. A scheduled anchor in a life that had drifted far from the toxic shore of my childhood. Grandpa opened the door, wearing an apron I'd never seen before. He looked younger. The weight of keeping the family peace finally lifted from his stooped shoulders. "Parker." He smiled, waving a wooden spoon like a conductor's baton. "The risotto is nearly done." Inside, the condo was small but bright, filled with his maps instead of Mom's decorative pillows. He wasn't the confused invalid they had tried to paint him as. He was a man who had survived a shipwreck and built a raft from debris. We sat at a small bistro table. The silence comfortable rather than loaded. "Have you heard from her?" he asked quietly. I shook my head. Mom was serving 18 months in a minimum security facility upstate. Olivia had taken a plea deal for probation. Though her social life was effectively dead, Chase was the only one who truly ran. He was reportedly in Boston, dodging subpoenas. We didn't mention them often. They were ghosts now, haunting a past we had both agreed to leave behind. Grandpa pushed a small velvet box across the table. It wasn't jewelry. Inside was a bank token and a slip of paper with an account number. "I opened a new trust," he said, his voice steady. "No joint access. Just yours." It wasn't $500,000. The lawyers had taken a chunk of that. But it was enough to seed my own firm. "Build something honest," he said. "That's all." I closed my hand over the token, feeling the weight of his respect. For years, I believed my value lay in my utility. I thought if I was smart enough and quiet enough, they would eventually love me. I was wrong. Utility is a commodity, love is a choice. Grandpa had chosen me, not because I fixed his fee, but because I was the only one who told him the truth, when it cost me everything. The risotto was warm and salty. It tasted better than any Thanksgiving turkey I had ever choked down in that cold house. Back in my office, I have a new decoration on the wall. It isn't a diploma or a certification. It's a simple black frame containing a voided check for $500. Written in my mother's elegant, deceitful hand. Visitors assume it's the first dollar I ever earned, a symbol of humble beginnings. They are half right. It reminds me of the price I refused to accept. I sat down at my desk, logged into my new server, and finally started working for myself.